hauling stuff up and down the coast, fishing with it. Typically there'd be 5 guys who would probably go out fishing. They would get it hove to, or just be drifting, lines over the side. This would have been all open with some planks across it, probably some pens, so they would have just put the fish right in the pens, probably catch, 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of fish 2 or 3 days back in the port, and either selling probably the stuff on top fresh, or the rest of it wind up getting salted and dried. The Port of Salem, in its day, in the late 1700s, was primarily involved in the East India trade that's going over to the Indonesia and that area. It's spice trade and probably into China for silks. And there were more millionaires in Salem than anywhere else in the colonies at that time. 10% of the revenues came through the customs house. That's 10% of the revenues for the federal government. Don't forget, there were no income tax, believe it or not. It all was import duties that paid for the government. So 10% of it came through there. This was an ideal port. The British men of war couldn't come in here and raid it. It's all full of rocks and shoals. When we first come out there, there's a shoal that's underneath the water that runs all the way across the harbor. Some place it's only 3 feet deep. So, a man of war that's drawing 20, 28 feet, would never make it in here. And usually the ships come down the far shore down there, that's the main channel, do a dog leg at the, where the Danvers River comes into the sound here, and then turn into Salem Sound. This shore over here, a little bit off to the left is Beverly, and then further down the shore here is Beverly Farms. Turn of the 1900s, that would have been all mansions there. The merchants from Boston would have come up, spent their summers here in the cooler air and the sea breezes. Over this way we've got Manchester, then we've got Magnolia, and about 7 miles down this way is Gloucester. So Gloucester isn't that very far, by sea here. And don't forget, that's how much most of the people got around. The roads weren't that great. The War of 1812, they decided to have an embargo against the Brits. They knew it had come to war. The Salem merchants weren't too happy because just a little bit because now they were kind of blockaded in port. The British wouldn't let them out. We knew we were going to war, so about 25 sea captains and mates got together. They pooled their money and they went up to a Essex area here in Cape Ann. It's just outside of Gloucester, west of Gloucester. And they bought this fishing schooner. They had her outfitted with cannons, so they had two cannons up front here, probably 6-pounders. That would have been a ball about just a little bigger than your fist. Definitely would have put a hole in the side of a boat. And 2 cannons across here. And then a couple of these swivel guns that basically shoot the 1-pound ball, but typically they'd load those with glass and stones and nails, and one shot of that and you hit the sail, it's going to be all cut to ribbons. You're going to get their attention. So war was declared. They already had somebody down there. They had the boat. They got what they call a letter of marque to basically be a part of the private navy to harass the enemy. So they weren't going to go out and take on a man of war with it. So one shot man of war, this thing would be, well, it would be no longer. And I just got to keep an eye on all the boats around us. And they were ready to go. They went out in 3 days. I think they had 4 prizes. They basically had made 15 times their investment. because what you do is you bring back the boat. The reason why you need so many captains is you had to put a crew in the other boat and sail it back. The seaman didn't care. He was getting paid. Most of them couldn't swim. He didn't want to fight or jump in the water or get blown in the water. So he was willing to do what you needed him to. So you just took the officers prisoners and you had to sail it back to Salem, bring the vessel before the court. They would determine its value and they would auction it off. The crew would split the money up. The government might take 10% of that, and so it went. And they had a very successful career. A lot of the boats hadn't heard that there was a war yet, so they had to jump on the merchantmen, who basically were up in Maine, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. They're loading lumber and pitch and materials. Don't forget, England at this point had been with war for years. They had cut down every tree they had. There was nothing left. So this is a big resource for their lumber, you know, for their navy. I think about 18 months later, they came man of war up in the Bay of Fundy. They chased them inshore. There was a gale going. They wound up getting wrecked on a shoal. They had a boat on board. They rowed to an island, and they were there for a couple of weeks, I think. And then they tried to row out and capture a boat that was going by, and they missed that. But the jig was up. Now they knew where they were. The fame was very famous. The British were definitely looking for her, and they had a crew. They were taken prisoner. And some of them actually, I think 3 of them actually wound up in Dartmoor prison over in England. They were released after the war. Salem never quite came back as a port after that. Bigger ships were coming online. You get into the clipper ships. Salem wasn't deep enough to handle a clipper ship. Typically the friendship that's in there, that's your typical merchantman, that draws about 11.5, 12 feet. Most of your clipper ships were drawing 22, 25, or 28 feet or more. So Boston was a better port for that, and New York. This boat was actually, the owner actually had done a lot of research because there was so much information on the fame and such good records, you know, because of our prizes. He decided to get a replica built. Like I said, he was built by a shipwright, 11th generation shipwright up in Essex. Essex area in his day was called Tobacco, and this is actually called the Tobacco style schooner with its stern here. These two sea kindliness plus that boom coming across. That piece of lumber sticking up there kind of protects the guy on the helm. Okay.
What did they use for information for the design?
There was some relics around that they had. There was some good documentation because so many of these have been built.
What are you doing?
Typically, a fisherman would build one of these in the winter, maybe fish it a year and sell it the next season to get a little winter money, you know, after he's done fishing, and you know, build another one. So below the water line, she's put together what they call trunnels, tree nails. It could be a hardwood, it could be chestnut or something like this. We got to come up like 4 of those. Okay, we need to trim them. Okay, we're going to trim the sails here for a minute.
Ferry. Can you just like take a ferry from Boston to Salem?
Yeah.
What's that?
Obviously, it's easier than taking traffic. There we go. They catch their wake.
Okay, back to trunnels, chestnut or locust or something like that. They put